My name is Danica. I'm 29 years old, and I live in a small apartment in Denver. I guess you could say I'm the quiet one in the family, though that was never by choice. Growing up, it was easy to be invisible when your older sister was the one everyone couldn't stop talking about. Celeste was always the golden child. She had the looks, the charm, and most importantly, the attention. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, but the way they fawned over her, it was different. She was their star. I was just there. I was never bad at anything, but my efforts always seemed to fall flat. I remember when I entered my first science fair. I spent weeks working on a project about renewable energy sources, even managed to create a functional model that powered a small light bulb. I was proud of it, sure, but no one else seemed to care. Then there was Celeste. She had a dance recital that same week. She wore a sparkly tutu and did a few pirouettes that lasted less than 2 minutes. My parents couldn't stop talking about how graceful she was. They talked about it for weeks. Meanwhile, my little solar-powered light bulb barely got a passing glance. I wasn't bitter. Okay, maybe I was, but I wasn't about to make a scene. So, I learned to shrink into the background. My world revolved around my textbooks, my camera, and the long hours I spent by myself. Every time I tried something like taking pictures for the school yearbook or working on another science project, it felt like I was just trying to fill space that Celeste had already claimed for herself. She was always first to get the car, first to have a big sweet 16 party, first to get attention for doing the bare minimum. I don't think my parents even realized how much I was disappearing. They praised Celeste for things that barely deserved a compliment. She brought home a C+ in English once, and they couldn't stop telling everyone how proud they were of her for just getting through it. Me? I had perfect grades, stayed out of trouble, but they barely noticed. It wasn't like I was a perfect child. I would sometimes act out, not to get attention, but because it was the only way to feel something. But every time I tried to stand out, it was like there was a wall between me and anyone who mattered. My parents couldn't even see me unless it was about something I could do for them. The last straw came when Celeste was applying for colleges. I had already been accepted into a great school with a full scholarship, thanks to my academic achievements. But when it came to Celeste's college application process, they treated her like it was the end of the world. She didn't know what she wanted to study, kept changing her mind, and barely bothered to write a decent application. Still, my parents made a big show of getting her the best tutor, helping her with every single part of the process. One night, I was sitting at the dinner table, having just returned from a photography class I had signed up for. It wasn't my dream job, but it made me feel something. Celeste was talking about how hard it was to decide between a fashion design school and studying dance. Meanwhile, my parents smiled at her, telling her how proud they were of her ambition. It was the same night that I realized something. I had been giving them everything I had and it was never enough. I wasn't even mad. I was just numb. I guess that's what it took to survive in a house where someone else always took the spotlight. Over time, I stopped trying to compete. I didn't need to, not really. I'd found a way to succeed on my own in my own quiet way. But the truth was I was just waiting for my life to begin. Without them. Without Celeste. That was about 5 years ago. College was nothing like I expected. Sure, I'd been dreaming of this moment for years. The freedom to dive deep into something I loved. But it was more work than I could have imagined. Between my internship, 2 part-time jobs, and keeping up with my coursework in botanical formulation, it felt like I was always running on fumes. The lab became my sanctuary. Not just because it was where I could finally focus on something that mattered to me, but because for once no one was there to compare me to Celeste. No one cared about my family or my past. It was just me and the plants. One afternoon while I was working on a new scent formulation, Leon walked in. I hadn't expected him, not in the lab at least. He was an investor working with a wellness brand, and I'd heard his name tossed around in meetings before. But I never thought he'd actually show interest in what I was doing. "Is this your work?" he asked, his voice warm but casual. He had an easy smile, like someone who genuinely cared about the conversation, not just the outcome. "Yeah, that's mine," I replied, looking up from my notebook. "I'm Leon. I'm working on a new line of natural scents for a brand I'm invested in. I'm looking for something unique. This," he gestured toward the mixture I was preparing, "this looks promising." I felt my heart skip a beat. An investor? Interested in me? It didn't make sense. "Well, I'm still perfecting it, but I've got a lot of ideas," I said, trying to sound professional, but also a little surprised by his presence. "That's the thing with this industry," Leon said, leaning in slightly. "It's all about uniqueness. I'd love to talk more about it, maybe over coffee sometime." I blinked. This guy wanted to talk about my work? Actually really talk? I had no idea how to handle this. But he was different from what I was used to, not pretentious, not here to give me a sales pitch, but genuinely interested. I agreed, albeit a little hesitant but intrigued. Weeks passed and Leon kept coming by my lab, asking more about my formulations. First it was all business. We discussed the scents I was working on, the research, the process, and every time he'd drop off little compliments, Not the kind I was used to hearing from my family or friends, but the kind that made me feel seen, respected. Then one day, he invited me out for dinner, not to discuss business, but because it's been a long week and we could both use a break. We ended up at a small, dimly lit restaurant near campus. The conversation flowed effortlessly. He was funny, smart, and unlike anyone I'd ever met. He didn't push for anything. There were no hidden motives, no jokes at my expense, no one trying to sell me something. It was just normal. By the end of the night, we were both laughing over dessert, and I found myself relaxed in a way I hadn't been in years. There was no pressure, no expectations. And for the first time, someone was interested in me. Not my grades, not my achievements, but my thoughts, my ideas. It was a relief. Over the next few months, Leon and I spent more time together. I still worked just as hard, sometimes harder, to keep up with everything. But he made everything easier. He validated my passion, my drive, and in doing so, he made me believe I was worthy of something better than what my family had ever given me. Leon wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. He listened. He admired my ambition, not because it made me a success, but because he could see how much it meant to me. And little by little, the woman who had once felt like a backup daughter started to feel like she belonged. It wasn't just about the chemistry we shared in the lab, it was about something deeper, something I never got at home. For the first time, someone was giving me the emotional support I'd never had, not just because they had to, but because they wanted to. I wasn't just Danica anymore. I was the woman he wanted to get to know. And that, for the first time in my life, made me feel like I mattered. The desert air was warm, the sky streaked with hues of pink and orange as Leon proposed. We were on a weekend getaway, just the two of us, far from everything. His words were simple but sincere, and the weight of the ring in his hand felt like a promise. I didn't hesitate. I said yes without a doubt. For the first time in my life, it felt like I had something that was entirely my own, something to be proud of. I wasn't overlooked anymore. Leon wanted me, and he wanted to build a future with me. That was more than I had ever dared to ask for. The joy of that moment stayed with me as I returned to reality, to a life still entangled with my family's indifference. I couldn't wait to share the news, but I didn't expect what followed. When I told my parents, they didn't ask how I felt. Instead, they wanted to know about Leon's business, his status, his wealth. He's successful, you know. That's good, right? My mom said, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe approval, or maybe just the convenience of having something to show off. My dad nodded, looking almost disinterested. Good for you, he mumbled, before asking Leon's net worth. They seemed more concerned with his success than with my happiness. But I brushed it off, at least for that moment. It was still exciting. He had proposed to me. The engagement party was held a week later. I wanted to be excited, but the moment I walked in, I saw it. Celeste. She was overdressed, like always, the attention-seeking kind of outfit that screamed, "Look at me." She made her entrance late, sweeping into the room with a confidence I envied. My stomach twisted. I knew the signs too well. She had already begun to hover around Leon, drawing him into conversation. Her laugh was too loud, her touches too lingering. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Leon, you have no idea how much fun we could have together," she said, her voice light, almost teasing, as she laid a hand on his arm. Leon smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I think I've heard that before," he joked, clearly uncomfortable. But Celeste didn't back off. I felt a pang in my chest. The little girl inside me, the one who had always felt like the backup daughter, stirred with a familiar sense of insecurity. I had spent years competing for attention, for validation, but nothing ever seemed to stick. Celeste had this effortless way of drawing eyes, of making everything about her. And now, even at my engagement party, she was stealing the spotlight. I tried to push it aside, tried to focus on Leon and how happy I was, but the unease kept creeping back. There she was, leaning in close to him, laughing just a bit too loudly, looking at him like she wanted to make him hers. It was everything I had seen growing up, her ability to take and never give back, her talent for taking over a room without apology. I could feel my pulse quicken. I tried to rationalize it. She was just being friendly. It's harmless, right? But something inside me told me it wasn't harmless. It never was. I tried to push the thoughts aside and enjoy the evening, but every time I glanced over at them, my gut tightened. Her hand brushing his arm, the way she leaned in when she spoke to him, the way she completely monopolized his attention when I was distracted by a conversation with one of my aunts. It wasn't even that she was flirty, not exactly. It was the way she made everything seem like it belonged to her, and Leon was no exception. It was familiar, like I had seen this play out 1,000 times before, but this time it was happening to me. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was being paranoid, but the words my mother had once said about me being too serious echoed in my mind. Celeste had always known how to get the attention she wanted, and I was just there. Even when I was the one getting married, it felt like she was the star. Leon caught my eye across the room and gave me a warm, reassuring smile, but it didn't calm the storm inside me. Was I overreacting? Was I just being the insecure little sister again? I wasn't sure anymore. The old feelings came rushing back, the memories of being overlooked, of always being second best. As the night wore on, I tried to engage with other guests, but my eyes kept darting to Celeste and Leon. Her flirtation was subtle, but it was there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. At first, I told myself it was just Celeste being Celeste. She always had a way of showing up uninvited, making everything about her without anyone really questioning it. But when she started popping by my condo more frequently, it began to feel like something else, like a subtle invasion into the life I was finally starting to build. She'd appear at odd times, always dressed to impress in some high-end outfit I knew she couldn't afford on her own. It was as if she were trying to blend into my world, the world that had once felt out of reach. She'd charm Leon, turning every interaction into a performance. "Danika's got the best setup here, doesn't she?" she'd say, practically throwing herself into the armchair in our living room as if she belonged. It was always the same, a laugh, a compliment, a few questions about my work, as if it were all just a casual visit. But I knew better. I knew this was more than just sisterly bonding. It happened most nights when I worked late shifts. I'd come home to find the two of them eating dinner together, talking about the things I had no say in. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that they were sharing those moments without me, or the way they dismissed my concerns when I brought it up. One night, I finally confronted Leon. "Why does she keep showing up here?" I asked, my voice more frustrated than I intended. Leon looked surprised. "She's your sister, Danika. What's the harm in her coming over?" "It's not just that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's acting like she's part of everything now, like she belongs here. And it feels like, I don't know, like I'm being erased." He shook his head, clearly not understanding. "You're overthinking it. She's just being friendly." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing him to her, even if he didn't realize it yet. The more I watched her insert herself into our lives, the more I started to feel like I was losing the one person who actually saw me, the one person who, for the first time, made me feel worthy. It got worse when Leon began staying out late. He'd come home smelling like a scent I didn't recognize. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but when it happened again and again, I couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of dread in my stomach. He was coming home late more often, and the scent lingered, an unfamiliar perfume I couldn't place. I confronted him one evening after he returned from another late dinner with Celeste. "Why do you smell like that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He paused, looking guilty. "It's nothing. It's probably just from the restaurant. You know how it is." But I knew the scent didn't belong to a restaurant, and it certainly didn't belong to me. And then, as if the universe had decided to rip the blinders off, Leon finally confessed. "I've been seeing Celeste," he said quietly. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "We've been talking a lot, and I don't know how it happened, but I'm in love with her." The room spun. My first thought was a desperate attempt at denial, a desperate cry to believe it wasn't true. But the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. The betrayal was real. He and Celeste, they were in love. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, feeling the weight of every moment I had spent investing in a relationship that had been a lie from the start. I had given him my trust, and he had given it to her. "Why?" I asked, my voice small, fragile. "I don't know," he said, his voice full of guilt. "It just happened." But it didn't matter. Didn't matter why. What mattered was the simple, brutal truth. The family that had never truly been mine, the sister who had always overshadowed me, had now taken away the one thing I had fought for. The pain was sharp and deep, but worse than that, I felt utterly alone. I had always believed that my family would be there when everything fell apart. It was a foolish belief, one that cost me more than I was ready to lose. After Leon's confession, I was left reeling, unsure of who I could turn to. I needed someone, anyone who would stand by me, who would tell me that it would be okay. But when I called my parents in desperation, hoping for a safe place to land, I was met with nothing but silence and excuses. "Mom, Dad, I need help. I don't know where else to go," I said, my voice thick with tears. "Sweetheart, it's just, there's been some renovations happening at the house, and it's not a good time for anyone to stay," my mother replied in that clipped tone of hers. "Bad timing," my dad added, as though that was enough. "You know we'd help if we could, but things are complicated right now." I tried to fight it. "Please, I don't have anywhere else. I don't know what to do." But they didn't care. I could feel the distance in their voices, the subtle allegiance to Celeste that they had never even tried to hide. "We're really sorry, Danika," my mom said, her voice too smooth. "But this is just not the right time." I slammed my phone down, tears blurring my vision. It hit me then, they knew. They knew about the affair, or at least had suspected it, and they had done nothing. They'd chosen Celeste, as they always had. The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't stay in their empty, dismissive world any longer. I filed for divorce the next day. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was what I had to do. The pain of betrayal still gnawed at me, but I had no choice. The prenup made it clear. I would walk away with nothing, not even a shred of dignity left. Leon tried to reach out, but I wasn't interested in his apologies anymore. I wanted nothing to do with him. I was done. The only thing I could do now was pick up the pieces of my shattered life, even if that meant starting from nothing. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my job was gone too. Leon's influence reached deeper than I'd ever expected. He went to my employer and sabotaged my reputation, spinning lies about my work ethic and personal issues. Without warning, I was fired. My career, my independence, everything I had worked for crumbled before my eyes. I was jobless, homeless, and utterly alone. I felt like I was drowning. Every dream I'd built, every small piece of security I'd carefully placed around me, was ripped away in an instant. My parents had already abandoned me, and now even my work, my one thing that had never failed me, was taken. The world that I had spent so much time carving out for myself felt like it was collapsing under the weight of everyone else's choices. But I couldn't just give up. I didn't have the luxury of wallowing. I had to keep moving, even if I didn't know where I was going. My self-reliance, the one thing I had always clung to, was now all I had left. And despite everything, it had to be enough. It was a late night, a few weeks after everything had fallen apart, when I saw an ad pop up on my feed. Start your own business in 30 days. I'd been scrolling mindlessly, numb from the wreckage of my life, but something about that phrase caught my attention. Start your own business. I could. Why not? I had nothing left, not even pride to lose. My last job was gone, my marriage was over, and my family had made it clear they didn't want me. But I had something they could never take: the skills I'd built over years of studying chemistry, my love for blending fragrances, and the drive to make something of myself. So why not start there? I spent the next few days piecing together a plan. I knew what I was doing: botanical formulation, essential oils, unique blends. There was a market for it, I knew there was. I wasn't going to start with grand expectations. My studio apartment was small, barely enough space to even move, but I could work with that. I set up a tiny workspace surrounded by test tubes, oils, and notebooks full of formulas. The first batch of scents wasn't anything impressive, but it was mine. It was real. I posted a few photos online, and when I got a few likes, I dared to be optimistic. Slowly, things began to snowball. A local influencer featured one of my scents in a blog post. I had no idea how much that would change things. Orders flooded in. I was making something real, from nothing but heartbreak and determination. I pushed through every sleepless night, mixing, testing, and packaging orders that felt like small victories. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It was the one thing that didn't break when everything else did. 2 years later, I opened a small studio in downtown Denver. The space was modest, but it had character. And more importantly, it was mine. I didn't need to beg for a place to stay anymore. I didn't need my family's approval. I had my customers, my business, and a sense of pride that had long been absent from my life. I spent a lot of time thinking about how far I had come, about how every setback, every failure, had carved space for me to build something from the ground up. Every rejection, every betrayal had made me stronger. This was the life I had always dreamed of, but never thought I could have. I didn't need to be validated by my family. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had learned how to validate myself, and it felt better than anything they had ever offered. I was thriving. As I packed orders that week, my phone buzzed with another notification. Another lifestyle influencer had posted a glowing review of my products, tagging me in her stories. It felt surreal, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I had created something real. The buzz in the studio was a comforting hum. People came in and out, loyal clients, curious new customers, all of them reminding me that the world I built didn't need anyone who had ever abandoned me. It was mine, and I had earned it. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the calming scent of my newest blend. It wasn't just a fragrance. It was my story, my journey from being invisible to standing tall, proud of who I had become. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for it. The ashes of my past had created the foundation for everything I had now. And I was finally starting to believe it. I didn't need anyone's validation. I had created my own. I hadn't seen Celeste in over a year. After everything, the affair with Leon, the years of rivalry, the abandonment, I didn't expect to see her again. But one rainy afternoon, she showed up at my studio, standing in the doorway, disheveled and holding a small baby wrapped tightly in a blanket. For a moment, I just stared at her, unsure if I was seeing things. Her makeup was smeared, her hair messy, and her clothes were cheap and faded. She looked broken. It wasn't the confident, perfect Celeste I'd grown up with. She was a shadow of the person who had once cast a shadow over my entire life. Danica, her voice was soft, almost desperate. Can we talk? I hesitated, still standing by the door. Part of me wanted to slam it shut, to pretend I didn't see her, didn't hear her, but another part of me couldn't just ignore her. Not completely. The baby in her arms seemed to pull me in. I finally stepped aside, letting her in. She looked around, her eyes wide as if seeing my studio for the first time. She placed the baby on the couch, swaddling him protectively in her arms, avoiding my gaze. What's going on, Celeste? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. What are you doing here? She looked down at the baby for a moment before speaking. It's Leon. He left me. After everything he found out I cheated. I didn't think he would ever leave, but he did. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and she wiped away a tear that I could tell she didn't want me to see. For a second my heart softened. It wasn't pity. It wasn't empathy. But there was something raw in her face, something that made me wonder if the woman standing before me could ever be the sister I once envied. Now I have nothing, Celeste continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't have a home, no job, no family. I can't do this on my own, Danica. I need your help, please. She looked at me, her eyes wide, almost pleading. You're the only one I can turn to. Please, I need to stay with you just for a while. I can't do this alone. He's your nephew. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. He's your nephew. My nephew. She had the nerve to bring that up, to manipulate me with the same false sense of family that had always been her shield. But I saw through her. I saw the pattern, the one she'd been following her entire life, using others when it suited her, then discarding them once she'd gotten what she wanted. She had used me before and she was trying to do it again. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of composure I had left. No, Celeste. I can't help you. Not after everything that's happened. You chose your path. You made your choices. Now you need to live with them. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Danica, please. I know I messed up, but I'm asking for help. I have nowhere else to go. I shook my head, my heart hardening with every word. You're not a victim, Celeste. You're not the one who deserves help. You made this mess and now it's yours to clean up. I'm sorry, but I can't be a part of that anymore. Her face crumpled and she looked away, a single sob escaping her throat. But I didn't give in. Not this time. Celeste gathered the baby into her arms, her shoulders shaking with sobs as she turned to leave. You won't even help me? She whispered, barely audible. I didn't answer. There was nothing more to say. As the door closed behind her, I stood there feeling strangely calm. It was the first time I had ever turned her away, and for the first time in my life I wasn't shaken by the betrayal or the guilt. I was finally unfazed. I returned to my work, the sound of her sobbing outside fading as the door clicked shut. It was over. I had outgrown her, outgrown them all. It's funny how the universe works. You give up everything, your time, your trust, your heart, to people who never asked for it, and then you're left to pick up the pieces. But sometimes, just sometimes, the truth comes out, and you realize you've been holding on to something for so long, just to let it go. It was a month after Celeste had shown up at my studio, broken and begging, when I first heard about Leon. His business, the one he'd always bragged about, had crumbled. I wasn't surprised. The thing with Leon was that he was never as smart as he thought he was. But hearing that he'd been exposed, that he'd ruined his own image, was almost too sweet to believe. What got to me wasn't just his fall from grace, though. It was what followed. Celeste, who had been so sure of herself when she was with him, had somehow managed to ruin his reputation by accusing him of abuse. I could already hear her voice in my head, twisting the truth to suit her needs. She'd always known how to manipulate people, how to make them see what she wanted them to see. But it backfired this time. She exposed him, but she exposed herself too. Word spread quickly, as things like this always do. Celeste, once the golden girl, was now working a customer service job, the kind of job she used to mock, the kind she thought was beneath her. She was living in a tiny apartment, her debts piling up. The irony was delicious. It didn't stop there. My parents, ever the enablers, had to sell their house to help pay off Celeste's debts. The same house they had always thought of as their nest egg. Gone. All of it. It was only a matter of time before they started contacting me. At first it was just a text here, a voicemail there. Then the emails came, guilt-laced and desperate. Danica, we know things have been hard, but we're family. You can't just walk away from that. Come home. We need you. I laughed bitterly, sitting alone in my apartment as I read their messages. The things they'd never said to me, the things they'd never done for me, suddenly poured out in their pleas for me to come back, to forgive them. I couldn't bring myself to respond. Leon tried to reach out too. He sent a message asking if we could talk. He wanted to apologize, he said, but I wasn't interested. The man who had broken me, the man who had destroyed everything we'd built together, was the last person I wanted to hear from. No, I texted back simply, hitting send with finality. There was nothing left to say. Things went quiet for a while. My studio flourished, more than I ever could have hoped. Customers lined up for my fragrances, each bottle telling a story of resilience and rebirth. I didn't need them, my family, Leon, Celeste. I had found my own path, my own success. And the best part? I wasn't doing it for anyone else. And then, as if to remind me how far I'd come, Matthew came into my life. He was everything Leon had never been, thoughtful, kind, honest, a chef who loved me in a way that made me feel seen, valued for the first time. With Matthew I felt loved. With him I felt safe. For the first time I wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, to show someone my scars. He didn't ask for anything except me. A few months later, Matthew proposed, and this time when I shared the news with my family, the response was different. My parents barely reacted. Celeste didn't even show up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't disappointed. I didn't need them there. I had built a life for myself, a life that was mine, full of people who loved me for who I was. It was more than I could have asked for. As the days passed and things settled into place, I found myself looking back at everything I had gone through, everything I had survived, the betrayals, the disappointments, the isolation. But I wasn't broken. I was stronger, more confident. I had everything I needed to move forward without them. The best part was realizing that I didn't need to forgive them. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had outgrown them. And that was enough. As I stood in my studio one evening, finishing the last batch of wedding fragrances I'd been working on for myself, I breathed in the familiar, comforting scent. It wasn't just a fragrance. It was the culmination of everything: power, peace, and freedom. I smiled, locking up the shop for the night. The life I had now was everything I needed, everything I had fought for, and nothing, not even my past, would take that away. It was a quiet evening at the studio, the kind of peace that only comes when you finally learn to let go. The soft buzz of the lights above was the only sound, except for the gentle clink of glass bottles as I arranged the final batch of wedding fragrances for my big day. The scent in the air was subtle, a blend of lavender and sandalwood, but it held so much more than just fragrance. It held everything I had fought for. As I worked, I let my mind wander over the past few years. The betrayals, the pain, the loneliness. It all felt so distant now, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. My life now was a life I had built with my own hands, one that had taken everything out of me but had also given back in ways I never expected. I had rebuilt myself from the rubble of a family that had never truly seen me, and now I was standing here on my terms and ready to move forward. I thought about my parents, the ones who had always seen Celeste as the center of their world. I had spent years chasing their approval, only to realize that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for them. And then there was Leon, who had taken my trust, my love, and turned it into a lie. He'd shattered everything we had, and in doing so, he had set me free. He had given me the strength to walk away, to stop asking for validation from people who would never give it to me. Matthew was different. His love was steady and real, not tainted by manipulation or self-interest. He didn't need anything from me except my heart, and that was the love I had spent my whole life searching for. With him, I knew what it meant to be seen, not just for my accomplishments but for who I truly was. His gentle touch, his unwavering support, that was the family I had always dreamed of. I grabbed my journal from the desk and opened it to the page where I had written my thoughts a few months ago. I never needed to forgive them. I just needed to outgrow them. I closed the journal and smiled. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about strength. The strength to move on, to step into my own life and let go of the chains that had bound me to them. The studio was buzzing with energy as I worked through the last few details, but it wasn't frantic. It wasn't chaos. It was calm, steady, and peaceful. I had built this life with my own hands. I had created my own family, my own future, and it was mine, all mine. The final touches of the fragrance filled the room as I finished preparing the last batch. This scent, this was my rebirth. The woman who had been broken and abandoned was now standing tall, surrounded by love, success, and freedom. As I locked up the shop for the night, I breathed in the air deeply. The scent of my own making: power, peace, and freedom. I had outgrown them, and I was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in years I felt whole, and no one, no matter how much they tried, could take that away from me.